So what's one of your favorite scenes from this movie?
I'm glad you asked. There are so many ridiculous scenes in this movie, but I think one of my favorite happens like in the first third of the movie. And up until this point, we don't really have a good idea of what the monster is. You have your two leads, Val and Earl, getting on horses trying to get help. And all of a sudden, their horses get attacked. The snakes come around. They feel the earth moving. And then it turns out it's this giant kind of Dune-esque worm, and in its mouth has these three snakes as its tongues, and they freak out. The worm just dives into the ground, starts chasing them, and they try to get on the other side of an aqueduct, and they miss by just like your fingertips, and they fall down, and they turn around, they're like, oh, we're about to get eaten. And then the worm kind of knocks itself into it. It knocked itself dead. And so now you're thinking, okay, the monster's gone. And then this third protagonist, Rhonda, she comes in and she was like, guys, based on my calculations, there's like 3 more of these.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, podcasts, and more. Where there is a story, there's a reason to read or watch, in today's case. And you're joining us at the beginning of it's our spring special this time, where we're looking at the movies or stories or books that maybe aren't good critically, but are good and important in our hearts. And joining me to discuss one of his favorite bad movies is my friend Shamir Muñoz. Welcome back, Shamir.
Hi, glad to be back.
So is there anything, you did come on a long time ago, but is there anything that you would like to say to introduce yourself for people who maybe missed that first episode?
Yeah, my name is Shamir. I'm still here, still enjoying really out there books, movies, podcasts, all the nice fun junk. And I'm happy to be here to share what I consider my favorite movie, which I'm super excited to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what movie is that, Shamir?
So this movie is called Tremors, and it came out in the year of my birth, 1990, and it's such a cultural paradigm shift in my life that I didn't think this was my favorite movie until I kind of sat down and my friends were like, "What movies do you like?" And I was rattling off, the critically acclaimed ones, and I stopped and I thought about it and be like, the movie I've rewatched the most is Tremors, and I had to sit there and be like, it might be my favorite movie, and I am okay with that.
But sometimes that's the fun of these things, is you never really know where the most influence is going to come from.
Well, the cool thing about Tremors is it's a great movie, but there are so many interesting things about it beyond just the scope of the actual movie. For one thing, it was the debut of Reba as an actress.
Hey,
it was
really?
the first movie it was the first movie she acted in.
Wow.
And also it very, very, very closely passes the Bechdel test by a line, but it does. So there's that.
The Bechdel test is a way to feminist critique movies, which is just to ask at any point in time during a movie, do 2 female characters have a conversation about something that is not a male character or just a man?
Yeah, and it very technically passes that test.
So, feminist icon Tremors, continue as you were saying something else.
Yeah, no, it's a really good movie. It's also a really good movie because there's a scene where one of the characters gives a kid when I'm saying it sounds weird, but it gives the kid a gun to kind of give him courage to run across the gap. And he runs and he realizes they gave him a gun with no bullets, so it's no blanks, nothing. And so he was like, "What? You jerk, you gave me this gun over here." And here's the thing, he takes the gun, and even though he knows and we know that it's empty, he still performs proper gun safety and opens it, checks it, closes it back, puts it on to safety, and puts it away.
And we love that.
And we love that.
I was going to say, I bet that's another test. In how many action movies do they perform any level of gun safety? Or do they just wave those things around like a water pistol?
And then just toss it to the side and say, yeah, let anyone find it. Yeah.
That's okay. They're not volatile. It's fine.
It's fine.
So, well, I think at this point then let's get into a summary of what happens in this is Ron Underwood was the director. So Ron Underwood's 1990s movie Tremors.
Yeah. So the movie starts off by giving the setting. This is set in Perfection, Nevada, which is a small town population of like maybe 12 people. Yeah,
It's like a ghost
tiny.
town.
And
Okay.
yeah, and spoilers, like within the first 10 minutes, I think 4 of them die.
So population,
I guess.
a tragic population decrease.
In decline. Yeah. So our protagonists are 2 handymen, Earl and Val. Val played by Kevin Bacon, which is really cool. Fred Ward plays Earl. And they're just handymen for this town. They're doing their chores and they realize, man, there is nothing in this little podunk town out in the middle of nowhere. It's geographic isolation. So they decide, let's head to the nearby town Bixby, which is not really better, but it has more than 12 people, I guess.
More than 8
Maybe a couple hundred.
Population is not declining.
We've decided, let's just get out.
Mm-hmm.
And so they pack up their belongings. And on their way out, they find some guy stuck up like a telephone tower. And turns out he's dead. So they take him over to the doctors to check him out. The doctors are also 2 people living in the middle of nowhere. The only doctor in town.
Business
and he was like,
should be banging.
But that happens. They're like, okay, this is weird. This is strange. We don't care. We still need to get out of Dodge. And so they try again. On their way out, they uncover this time a farmer whose entire sheep are all eaten, and as is he. And they're like, what is going on?
Yeah, this is scary.
Back to the town. They're like, something is weird. Something is happening. We need to like get people here, and they're like, telephone lines are down. And earlier they had a scene where the what appears to us, and interestingly enough in the theatrical release of this, also on the poster, it looks like one big snake, and so you think going into this that's the monster. And
it does look like a snake. It looks like a snake with teeth.
Yeah, it's like a giant anaconda kind of thing.
Yeah,
but you only ever see it come out of the ground. You never see its tail, so you think, okay, that's what they're dealing with. It goes underground. We've seen it eating people from underground. It kills 2 construction workers, and that causes a small avalanche. That means that one road out of the town is now blocked.
Well, that's a bummer.
Now they're stuck.
Yeah. That's a huge bummer for trying to get out of Dodge.
They discovered next is the doctors get eaten. The doctor and his wife, they're gone.
Oh, no.
The only doctor is gone, so we're on our own. Our third protagonist is this geologist, or I guess seismologist, Rhonda Lebec. She's a student at university. She's doing her thesis here. Because this place is so empty that it's really good for earthquakes, right?
Okay.
And she's like, I've been getting strange readings. Is anyone doing mining? And they're like, no one's mining anything over here.
So she's there. She's like, yeah, there's like earthquakes. And they're like, nope, there's not. And she's like, actually, there are, though.
Yeah, or something is moving underground. And this is the infamous scene of one of the snake kind of things latches onto their car and they drive off and they rip it out. Apparently, it smells awful. That's a big plot point for some reason.
Oh, okay.
It's commented on a lot.
Well, you have to be able to trace it, right? Like if it's a monster movie, the people need to find some way of like, how do we know it's around? And so maybe the smell is that?
You're on the right point, but apparently they only smell awful if they're really close by. But you will know when they're around, and they figure it out. So they're like, all right, let's get on these horses. And since we can't take the road with our car, we'll just take the horses over the mountain, because they need to tell someone. There's no way to get a message out, right? Okay. And so they figure, okay, well, no one's heard from us in a day or so. There's bound to be a courier or something coming here. And then we pan over to the courier is also being just eaten, just parts all over the road. So
Huge
they don't
bummer.
know that. They finally get a view of the actual monster. Then it attacks the horses, so the horses are donezo. So now they don't even have horses.
No. Tragic.
So
okay.
then it turns out it's this giant worm-like beast, and the snakes that we saw were actually just its tongue.
So I have a question.
And yeah.
So the monster, is a giant underground worm that has like snakes for tongues. And there are 4 big worms. There
are 4 big worms, and each of these worms have 3 snaky tongues inside of them.
How big are the snaky tongues?
Anacondas.
For those of us who are not snake initiated, is that like the size of your hand?
Oh, bigger. It's like the size of your head.
Okay. If you guys missed last time when Shamir was talking about the reptile room, Shamir is a reptile enthusiast and keeps snakes as pets. So he is extremely well educated on this in a way that I'm not. So okay. So they finally see it and they're like, yo, there's a lot.
Yeah, 3 of them all over the place. So They run with the seismologist Rhonda Levesque, and they realize that how it knows where you are is just that the vibrations you make in the ground. You're running everything, and it also explains why the one guy died up on the telephone pole, because he saw them and he ran up the telephone pole, but then they wouldn't let him leave.
Oh, all right. Well, that's a mystery solved. So where does it go from here?
So they get onto these giant boulders, and because it's solid rock, they can't tunnel under them, and so they're safe on it for the night. The next day, Rhonda realizes that they can use these long poles that are just strewn around the place as pole vaults, and then they vault from rock to rock to finally get into her car.
That is insane that you're just like, I know how to pole vault and we can do that. But
I know.
Good for them.
Yeah, and so this is also, while this whole thing is happening, this whole movie, you also see how campy it is. Like when we're in the car, one of the giant snake things trying to attack them, and then Kevin Bacon and Val just punches it. It's like that was his go-to.
You know, I would be upset if someone punched my tongue. I do get why that might like at least pause a worm. But yeah, this is fun. So it's got that good vibe. How does the movie end? How do they take care of this, if they do?
Yeah, so after it eats like one or two more people, they're stuck on top of these buildings, and the worms are starting to tunnel under them to like sink them into the ground, because apparently they're smart and they learn.
Ugh, the worst.
Hate when they also named them graboids.
Graboids?
Graboids is the name of the worm. Yes.
Okay.
So basically, they realize that they need to get up to the mountains where you have all those boulders, and then they could just ride the boulders over to the next town over. And so they need something really heavy that they can't pull up. So they get a giant cat, like one of those tractors, and they attach like a bed to it, and then they just put everything in there, and they go. And the worms aren't heavy enough to get in there. Another character, the gun enthusiast, he and his wife is played by Reba. They have so much ammunition. Apparently, they're like doomsday preppers, and they have so many guns. And so they all jump into the cat, and then they're going up the trail, and he has dynamite. So he throws the dynamite, it explodes, sends the worms scurrying away for a little bit.
Yeah.
And so they use that to kind of get to some giant boulders on the side to wait it out. And then they realize they're now stuck there, and there are like two worms left. And then one of them realizes, if we throw the dynamite and we pull it with a string, maybe they'll think it's an animal and eat it. And they do that. Worm takes it, it explodes.
Oh.
And that's one worm. And then the second worm, Kevin Bacon and the two other protagonists take care of it by throwing the dynamite behind the worm, scaring it so it like tunnels off a cliff. And then goes splat at the bottom. And then that was the end of the movie. They defeated the worms.
Did they go back? Do Val and it's Val and
Earl.
Do Val and Earl finally escape the town at the end of the movie, or do they decide to stay there because they fought for it?
So Val and Earl, kind of, it depends. They explain the sequel.
Oh, right. There's like 2 or 3 other movies after this.
Oh no, there's like 5 or 6.
Really? Oh boy.
Yes. Oh, can I talk about that for a minute?
Oh,
I just want to I don't want to mention it.
Mention it. Wait, so does this one end in like media res then, where they're like, yeah, we killed the worm, high five, oh no, and then like credits or what?
So at the end, Val gets with Rhonda. They get together. They're happy together, and Rhonda's happy because, like a seismologist, she's gonna be on the forefront of like explaining about these worms, about these graboids, because they're a scientific miracle and discovery. And then, just as a spoiler, we find out later that Val and Earl ended up getting so much money off of like being on National Geographic, making Pac-Man style games of it, like selling movie rights. Except Earl like wastes all his money, and then that's kind of like, and that's where the second movie kind of kicks off.
Okay,
and then that's that.
That it sounds. You know what? I will say it does sound like it does sound like a good monster movie.
It is a really fun monster movie. It's campy and it has great moments and so many quotable lines, and I've seen it like 20 times.
So then let's get into, we have a couple of different questions this time, but even though it is a good monster movie, I don't think it was very well critically acclaimed. Why do you think that this movie, was it a box office flop? If it wasn't, what made it not good?
I don't think it was a box office flop, but it definitely wasn't a hit. I think it premiered like in the third opening on its opening weekend, and then it just quickly fell off, and then no one ever talked about it. I think it made like a fifth of what they really wanted it to make, or they projected it to make. Yeah. So I guess in that sense, it was a flop. in terms of sales.
Like, it's not financially good, but it's good in the hearts and minds of people who see it, right? So
Yeah, 100%.
So what happened? Why do you think that it didn't do very well?
It might have been some of the marketing. It might have been like when they decided to turn it out. It might be at the time there was a lot of monster movies being made, so maybe it was just oversaturation of the market. But I do think that it did get a cult following after the fact.
It became more popular after it came out, not when it was released, but kind of like as more and more people, perhaps people like you, continued to watch it and rewatch it and rewatch it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because like 6 years after that is when they released the sequel, and I think it went straight to DVD. It had no theatrical release.
Wow.
But it was a really good sequel, followed by another sequel, followed by a prequel, and then it just got weird. Like the first two sequels were like, okay, we find out that the graboid is only the larval state, and then it turns to something called Shrieker.
It kind of gets like the alien treatment in terms of they're like, as we found it, this was only the adult middle stage of its life, but actually it's going to continue evolving and it's going to be terrible in all of them.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then let me ask you our penultimate question, which is, so it would seem, especially after like what you told me, it sounds like, I don't know, maybe there was just like bad marketing or something that made this not as popular as it should have been. But to you, like, what does this movie get right? Or like, what makes you love this movie so much?
Like I said, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that everything is a callback to something else.
And it's so like a really tight script.
Yeah, it's a really tight script. This whole movie, oh man, I love it so much because it's a very good proponent of using Chekhov's gun because everything is important. There's no wasted scenery. Great practical effects. Great performances. Even Reba, her 3 lines. You know, it was a diverse cast. It was a really well done cast. It had so much lore that it squeezed in this short movie. You know, it left us with really good questions, and it did what it did really well.
Shamir said this is a good example of Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gun is a story writing principle that says if you introduce a gun into a story, then you have to use it by the end of the play. But it's often used as a shorthand to say if you introduce something, you need to come back to it, and it should be important. So that's Chekhov's gun. And like, I appreciate more often the tight script. And like, nothing is there by accident, which is really hard to do. It's a really undervalued skill. And it's also not one that I think you see in this type of movie very much, in like a monster thriller.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it's really clever, or what they did with the amount of time they got. They told a full, complete story. A very good way of show, not tell. That sometimes I'm missing. There was no overt, like, let me list off what's happening right now, just in case you weren't paying attention, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. But before we go, I am going to stick with one old callback, which is if you could give Tremors your very own one-phrase subtitle, what would that be?
It would be like, they're coming from underground. Don't run.
Don't run. Tremors, don't run.
Don't run. Don't make noise. Just stop.
Don't stop, drop, and roll. Just stop. Would you? Okay, so is Tremors, don't run good?
Yes, I think it is fantastic.
Well, let me ask you, if you could give Tremors a rating out of 5 stars, 5 is the best, what would you give it?
I'm so biased, but if I'm looking at it from like a technical aspect of just like a good movie, is it a good movie? I would give it 5 out of 5. I could watch this movie if I only had one movie to watch for the rest of my life. It'd probably be Tremors.
Okay, I love it. Listen, follow your heart. And Shamir, thanks for coming on to my show and telling me about this 5-star movie, Tremors. And for now I know what happens. I finally know. I don't just have to like see it and hear about it in the social zeitgeist. And thank you to all of you out there for listening. This has been Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. I've been your host, Amanda Stevens, with my guest, Shamir Muñoz. And we were discussing the 1990 movie Tremors. Don't run. A tale of our time? Or at least a tale of our time in our hearts. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.